Just fuck it up. Just fuck it up. Just fuck it up. My baby, my Valentine. Yeah, they need to make you a just fuck it up. My baby, my Valentine. Yeah, they need to make just fuck it up. My baby, my Valentine. Yeah, they need to make you a temperature days. If you It's DJ Bolton building.
I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, and me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun.
It's DJ Bolton building.
I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, and me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun.
DJ Bolton building.
I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, and me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun.
DJ Bolton building.
I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, and me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun. I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, and me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun. I know you're in love, got me up the Mac with the extension, me up the money for your
It's DJ Bolton building.
I know you're in love. Got me up the Mac with the extension. And me up the money for your extensions. Got me like your hair longer than my gun. Ooh, now we have the guns and girls. I feel keep the balance. I'm up in my world when I sleep in a man. Anytime you could go down, she won't hold down. She let it all out. Bow, 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 bow.
My favorite girl had the French braids. I had a crush on her since back a day. She said our Usna needs a bandage. After I come round and gave her the 12 gauge. We tried to call my phone but it was engaged. I was with my little mama, she was honey glazed. I've been crushing on her since back then. Just the other day I gave her the Mac 10. I don't want just any girl cause I'm a little cheesy. But I swear I'm a sucker for a little Gucci. I had a skin fade like a little Boosie. I don't know when I gave little mama the little ooze. Cause you got a body shape that I can't forget. The way I make you drip when I'm talking slick. I'm ashamed cause when I came I was busting quick. That's why this time I came with a banana clip.
Got me up the Mac with the extension. And me up the money for your extension. Got me like your hair longer than my gun. Ooh, now we have the guns and girls. I think keep the balance. I'm up in my world when I sleep in a man. Anytime you can go down, she won't hold down. She got it all out. When I reach Poland, they're calling me Odogu, Odogu. And I stand at the town, I put down for Egu, Odogu. And nobody can stop you. And so we they fly past you. Over any obstacle, it be Odogu, Odogu. Say now who they draw the map, be Odogu. You are looking at the champion, Odogu. Why they just the shaky ass, she Odogu. With the person with the cash, she Odogu. Aje, kekele Odogu. Aje, kekele Odogu. Aje, kekele Odogu. Champion. Make up your mind, just to go. Bounce to the sound while I bounce with the do. Serve yourself, not the matter with the do. I'ma eat this slow. Move, make a move. I go slide, then you go sink like a boat. Me, I just they laugh like say life is a joke. And I give up girls with they clean, with they go. If your boyfriend don't get money, then they can't go. Come back. When I reach Poland, they're calling me Odogu, Odogu. And I stand at the town, I put down for Egu, Odogu. And nobody can stop you. And so we they fly past you. Over any obstacle.
Choro, 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 ja, choro, 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 ja, choro, 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 I'm a choro, ja, choro. Oh. Hell yeah. I don't wanna lose you this time, I want them. No time, I'm gonna winnie, wanna your love, they do me one time. Oh my, I'm gonna mommy. Show me how you feeling this night. Almost say your love, say now winnie, wanna your love, they do me this night, yeah. I need your grace, me never relent, my love no get shape, no matter the case, my music give me bass, my sweet bass, so my love no get shame, for you all day, every night, every day, me gon' need my baby to call on me, close to me, yeah. By the time when you dey wake up in the morning, man, I dey buy you side for me, make you vote for me.
I don't charge my energy, I no get time for no enemy. To repay one to me. Nothing with person never see. I'm on nothing with person never see. Forget it, I say bashi. Money soon expected. Take our body agent. I take a to the person. Je. I'm in the answer, yes sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes sir. Respect is reciprocal, even though I know say special. Anybody, we no want to search it. Anybody, we know the body. I can't something, I can't something. Go back to belle, I can't something. You want your bed, you never function because Cause myself I never go. I look you, they laugh, you go. I shall no say the time go come, mama, I no say the time go come. When you look go fit the line, mama, life not on python. Whether you like or not, go back to Jamie, you best get it go pass. Yeah, keep me jack on anybody, we no want to search it. Anybody, we no the carry body. I got something, I got something. Go back, I got something. Oh, Susanna, I hope you're happy now. I see you flexing on the ground with your sponsor. Susanna, I hope you're happy now. I see you change your skin color and your hair is longer now. Now corona body, Abocando ya Champs-Élysées. Ukitesa na kamini, yeah. None of my business. And I see you in London, silicone on your bum, shaking what your doctor gave ya. On your worst behavior, Susanna Van Gogh. This song, somebody loves you. Susanna Van Gogh.
I go cause I fire cut off for you. Yeah. You don't cause you a holla. You don't cause you a holla. Cause my heart is gonna scatter. I go run your race, kata. I no go do you jaga. I cannot let you go. No, I cannot let you go. Today you go give me number. I say 0 what is 0. Say you go give me number. Even from you, you're such a sexy tomato. I say 0 what is 0. Today you go give me number. I don't fall in love. I don't fall in love. Falaka is so beautiful. She does steal my heart, yeah. Falaka is so beautiful. I think it's blessing for it, yeah. I go cause you sorry. I fire cut off for you, yeah. I go cause you
Waiting again. If I lose you to one of the boys online. I feel crazy, I feel tired, I feel die. If tomorrow come, you know they my side. Check out that, do that. Kaye wada. Kola yo, koloi. Come and take Bosarawa. I go pray for you, and I go fight for you. My desire for you is more than I can explain. Show by $1 million, $1 million. $1 million. Tell your mommy I go pay. How much is $1 million? $1 million.
I know, boy. Anyway, Tonga the rhyme with corner. Will you come with me to my corner? I won't give you hard drive format. May was Senebe 5 on that. Nice chick, may a chroma. Maybe do nice flick with my Kodak. Freeze, baby cheese. Oh gosh, she body, maybe boom to say kunka. By the way, for simple, Vida, cause I the kai say me share our revival, but not many more mean and I'm team and try that. And then, say my chill, our viber, swine. You better sabe 6 hours. Now me rea my big crash over 20 hours. Man, no, you then chain hallmark. I grown quite my casa but all because of hunger. I don't know because of hunger. Hey, hunger, oh, hunger because of hunger. Nice couple. We see cancel henny do the try castle. What? Who a boy until we can't cuddle? Just say Osha Calvin Klein, Mesha White's Chapel. Sa, Mate. Mean to me, but Mesha, we didn't quite send me back. It was it, BBT, wappy. Yes, say your fact on the track, me is slow or you fast under 1 minute, pop, wappy. Anybody say bull fruit, it be boom after all. YOLO, oh my god, sack. Look at her, but busy. I don't know because of hey, go because of because of
Ghana girl say she want marry me yo. I hope so she sabi kuku wache. Hope your love go sweet past the shit up. Baby girl, I swear your body na killer oh. Oh, yeah, I get it tired of your body. Oh, only on your body. That girl for the corner, there's somebody made a call. I'm where see the wine, I'm a see fire for her body. And if she follow me go now, enjoyment go kill 'em. Baby girl, you bad, girl, the way you whine. I demand over you, girl. I demand over you, girl. Say you are my woman, my superwoman. I demand over you, girl. I demand over you, girl.
Yo, it's your boy Cream, hey, like, shake it. Well, I am when I'm at the lake. When only I do a blanket. You know you go be mad at day. You go be mad at day. If you see my baby, yeah. Girl, I'm there. Be the feeling I get. Now that your love, hey.
Fuck it up. My baby, my Valentine. Can I hit the making what temperature there is? If you leave me a good time, I swear. You are like the oxygen I need to survive. I'll be honest. Love me, me, I am so obsessed. I want to chop your heart. Never did it back and it's you. But now make us feel love. Yeah, my love one thing. Me make it bad man sing. $1,000 I go spend for your head. Talk all they want, I don't care what they say, cause your matter. Now you my con, they carry for my head every night. Now you I want, they carry to my bed. Oh, no, no. Don't tell me no, no, no. You can be my partner, never ride it solo, no. And we got no one lucky, no need to party, whoa. I feel it, what you're doing, know your baby, gotta go, gotta go. Your body, they back at me, sweet. Open up, make us see. Now you where they got my fancy. When they do me, I get fancy. Oh, no, 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 no.
But she go chop and if you give her cucumber. Walk out from Transamadi till I leg begin shake her with a locumba. Baby make her give you solid, make her even mix am with Ale and I walk pow. Hey, let me tell you. She dey feel and da 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 da. She dey feel and da 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 da. She dey feel and da 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 da. She feel and da do. She said till infinity, 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 infinity. She say make a I put it in, put it in, put it in, put it in. No. She said till infinity, oh, infinity, oh, infinity, oh. She said make I put it in, make I put it in, put it in, put it in. No. Take Kalauska, cover me like babushka. Would you like to get my kiwa? And your body, you different animal. Sangalo me like a JJ. Make I pretend like I'm Sonny Wiki. It's what you do with the banana. Would you tell me if you go get us for banana? Very much show yourself. Do what you do. Use Kayamata, you feel use Juju. They don't play me your tape for artillery. You they use collect boy salary. Make I put firewood for the fire. Send you the wire. Now you are go ama and I no go retire. Bedroom boys be like say you did for the choir. Do they be so lati do me lala. They feelin' da 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 da. They feelin' da 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 da. They feelin' da 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 da. They feelin' da 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 da. She said till infinity, till infinity, infinity, infinity. Oh, yeah. She said make I put it in, put it in, put it in, put it in. Oh, no. She said till infinity, oh, infinity, oh, infinity, oh. She said make I put it in, make I put it in, put it in, put it in. Oh, no.
Oh, so city, que rico, papi.
Start to fade, fire up your lighter, float on with the waves. You make me feel like, you make me feel like, you make me feel. When you do, tell a mission singer, like you want my emphasis spin roll like a jam can't tire. Endless loving and it can't expire. How say, Jaja never answer prayer. You know, sir, you have the loving for me body when you hold me, and if you call me, we come. Baby, me now let her go. Love is like a seed and you reap what you sow. Baby, when the bright lights start to fade, fire up your lighter, float on with the waves. You make me feel like, you make me feel like, where will we go? When the quarantine thing done and everybody touch.
Elle a jamais pensé qu'elle pouvait la garder.
me paye. Il me dit de s'arrêter. Je lui dirai là si je suis pas. Parce que facile de nous employer. Je passe à la ligne de paye. Il me dit de s'arrêter. Je lui dirai là si je suis pas. Parce que facile de nous employer.
Virtual edition. This is a space where young leaders engage in vigorous debate. They offer impactful solutions to the most pressing issues of the day. My name is Mopati Morake. I'm from Botswana, and I'm proud to be a faculty member here at African Leadership Academy. And it's an honor to co-host this event with my colleague,
Siavanga Michelle Ketiwa Hadebe from the Republic of South Africa. I am the Deputy Chairperson of ALAMAU, and I am also glad and I'm honored to be here and to host with Mr. Morake. Now, to formally welcome us, we have Dean Uzo, formerly known as Mama Uzo. Mama Uzo is the Dean of the Academy. She is a steward of this MAU program, and she is a mother to us all.
Absolutely.
Dean Uzo, everybody just take this time to help me welcome Dean Uzo. Take it away.
Good evening and greetings from Johannesburg. Good evening and greetings from Johannesburg. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Director General, and members of ALA-MAU Secretariat, Committee Chairpersons, students and staff teams, our distinguished keynote speaker, Ambassador Le Pen, and our distinguished guests, parents, school partner communities from all over the world, our cherished ALA community, staff, faculty, and beloved students, and of course, most importantly, a special welcome to you, our delegates and school advisors of ALA MAU 2021 conference. Welcome, Sawubona, Akwaba, Jambo, Ekabo, Non. I am not a person of few words. My friends and colleagues might even consider me quite mischievous at times. Why would I say this at such an auspicious occasion as this? Well, I am stumped because I've had the distinct pleasure of working with a leadership team of simply awesome human beings. Safia, Sia, Malaika, Leshi, Kimani, and Alex. These are the ALA MAU leadership team for 2021. With the postponement of MAU 2020, they became the first team in MAU history to not have experienced a conference before organizing theirs. I remember many a conversation with them talking through how they felt about the decision. This was utterly devastating to them. Yet, despite the sad feelings, they were upbeat and determined to host their conference next year. When I gave the decision to the team to go ahead with designing a virtual conference, I had no doubt that they would pull it off. They have spent the best part of 12 months researching and planning for this conference, and we are here today because this team never gave up. Despite the remote meetings, tedious connectivity, confusing time zones, competing schoolwork, they remained on task, resolute in their determination to host a conference by all costs. You see, resilience and relying on each other is what kept them focused. Their friendship as a team enabled them to harness their deepest fears and work together to create an inaugural online MAU 2021. For the past 4 years, I have had the pleasure of engaging our MAU leadership teams and have come to learn so much about one of our founding beliefs, the power of youth. At ALA, we mandate that our students have the power to dream big, take action to change the world. This 55-strong team has taken full advantage of this belief to develop their leadership, research, organization, and logistical skills. I wish this was something I could have experienced when I was growing. And therefore, it is an honor for me to be in this position to learn from them. I want to thank them for their commitment to the ALA spirit. You have all worked tirelessly over several months, and I would like everyone to give them a virtual fingers of praise. So if you don't know what it looks like, this is what it looks like. Everybody, thank you. I would not be wrong in saying that we have all been affected in one way or the other by COVID-19. Your time deliberating on this global challenge, delegates, will be of immense benefit to you, your communities and countries now and long into the future. My hope is that your recommendations will ensure life after COVID does not return to being business as usual. You are here to make sure that your voices are heard through your resolutions and recommendations to bring about change, not just for some, but for every single citizen of this great continent. Your voice matters. Your voice counts. So here are 3 things that I want you to do during this conference this year. Number 1, bring your focus, your energy, your engagement each day to each interaction, and make sure you are diligent in recognizing each other's contribution brought to the table. Everyone counts and everyone matters. Number 2, your role at this conference is to identify concrete and realistic solutions to overpowering and crippling problems for the continent. Focus on the solutions that will bring the most relief to your respective countries. And finally, I ask that you learn from each other and also learn with each other. Learn when it is best to listen and when it is best to speak. Africa needs your energy, your optimism, and your idealism. And I am positive that your generation will usher in an era of lasting peace and prosperity for our continent. I look forward to listening to your deliberations at the end of this conference. You are the next generation of global diplomatic leaders. I believe in you. We believe in you. Please accept my best wishes for a successful conference. Thank you.
Yeah, oh my God, look at that girl, the way she moving back. Yeah, I done lost her. Wine poco, go down poco. Oh no no, she wine poco, go down poco. Wine poco, go down poco. Oh no no, she wine poco, go down poco. Charlie, EPQ, 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 Joanna. Hey, I said make a shoot in my shot, oh, I, oh, Ghana. Up, down, oh, shake, I'll be you, baby, oh, Maria. Light, Jimasu, I got one never going. Yeah, that is the like, caro.
Thank you, African Dance, for that very creative, that snappy, that vibrant performance. And thank you, Dean Uzo, for your message. You know, her words, Sia, remind me of Margaret Mead's, actually. Yes. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Yeah. And indeed, like the power of young people, oftentimes we overlook young people, but we're hearing Din Uzo as our mother in MAU saying that she believes in the power of young people. And we've seen her let us take the lead and let us actually effect change through MAU and through various fields. And I think this is a message that our delegates, our advisors, all of us should actually take heed to.
Yep, absolutely. Why don't you introduce our next distinguished speaker?
Yes. Now we are going to welcome Maya Skolny. Ms. Maya is a member of the African Leadership Academy's faculty, and she is the person whose special attention to detail has allowed me, alongside 11 other committee chairs, to produce stellar and sleek study guides. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome my beloved teacher, Ms. Maya.
Thanks so much, Sia and Mr. Morake. Good afternoon, delegates from across the continent and the globe, the M2021 team, fellow faculty advisors, colleagues, and guests. It is a distinctive honor to be addressing you this afternoon, following the painful cancellation of MAU this time last year, and the immense amount of subsequent work that has gone into making this first virtual MAU a reality. At different stages of my life, I've had the chance to ruminate on this ambiguous concept that is leadership, beyond the grandeur and the platitudes. Teaching at ALA and my involvement in the International Relations Council and MAU has continually built on my understandings. In this address, I plan to elucidate 2 of these realizations on leadership. Principle 1, lead by personal example. During my middle and high school December breaks, I would spend 3 weeks at a youth movement educational camp just outside of Cape Town. As my school was relatively insular and politically conservative, it was at this camp that I got to know myself more. It was here that I grappled with the challenges facing society, social justice as a tool for change, and my position as a white Jewish South African. I grew among the singing sessions and impassioned debates, the experientials focused on current affairs and historical injustices, and the refreshing swims followed by group meditations. Importantly, these exhausting yet exhilarating camps were run by other young adults. As our leaders were more or less our peers, our proximity in age would at times motivate attempts at popularity. There were those who initiated large-scale water fights mere hours after their incandescent lecture on water scarcity. Leaders who helped campers steal sweets from the storeroom moments before their activity on corruption, or those who made chauvinistic comments between declarations that they were only joking, following their smoothly run session on sexism. But then there were others, whose missives on morality matched their quiet commitment to cleaning the dining hall each day. There were those who advocated publicly for gender equality and privately for women in leadership positions. There were those who taught on the HIV/AIDS crisis in South Africa and simultaneously worked behind the scenes in organizations such as the Treatment Action Campaign. The difference for those who shone as authentic leaders was their connection to the value that was fundamental to the camp itself, that of dugma eshit, which from Hebrew translates to leading by personal example. It was through them that I learned that while promoting certain beliefs, leaders ought to be constant exemplars. And while running official sessions, they too should participate in an ongoing, arduous project of self-reflection and education. Moreover, it was here that I learned about leadership as an opportunity to put principles into practice. Leading by personal example in the MAU context looks like the 50+ teenagers who are involved in the MAU 2020 conference, who I hope are here with us now on YouTube. From last year, they toiled in a 12-month process leading up to the outbreak of the pandemic. It looks like the conference chairperson last year, Sam, on the Friday before lockdown, asserting with gentle clarity, following an afternoon of deliberation, that the wisest thing to do would be to cancel. In fact, when she and her deputy chair, John, conveyed the news to the wider group, they held their ground to teary eyes, but no objection. Leaders in the room were not stomping their feet for their missed opportunities or their hours of effort. They responded this way because they genuinely cared about and prioritized the health of the delegates and advisors. Moreover, personal example looks like this new team, including, of course, the chair people in my research class, figuring out many things while over Zoom during a global crisis and being imaginative and attentive while doing so. It looks like the committee dynamics team putting themselves out during office hours to support the Year 1 IRC students over and above the official expectations. It looks like the current core team with their of Safia, Sia, and Malaika with their supportive secretariat, thinking through every detail of this conference while still fully committing to all their classes. It looks like their minimal complaints and maximum efforts to improve the MAU structure for future teams. On this note, what I would like to reiterate to all of you with political and diplomatic aspirations is this. It is inspired by the clarion call of C.S. Lewis from the text, The Inner Ring, which current ALA Year 2s will recognize from our seminal readings program. Refuse, by all means, to be cheaply lured into defying your own professed values, just to gain social clout. Genuine leaders do not engage in discussions about bettering this continent as mere clickbait, but rather as honest mediums to further their own work. Leaders don't deceive themselves for others, however I see it may be outside the social clique. Principle 2, view vulnerability as courage. Researcher storyteller Brené Brown's famed Netflix special, The Call to Courage, offers an insight into my second core principle for leadership. Brown, who has spent 20 years studying shame, does not simply advocate for us to be vulnerable in order to be our more authentic selves. Instead, she compellingly argues that vulnerability and courage are the same thing. In fact, she contends that to accurately measure how brave a leader is, we should examine their willingness towards exposure. This does not, by the way, refer to the quantity of intimate Instagram posts that someone puts out, for, as she reiterates, vulnerability minus boundaries is not vulnerability. Rather, it denotes the intention to give all of yourself to every aspect of your life, understanding that we cannot control the outcome. It is not only appreciating that you may risk failure, but rather knowing that living life this way will indeed see you stumble time and again. Our responses to disappointments following risks also count. As our brains are neurologically hardwired to protect us, in reaction to this hardship, we may strive to immediately and with minimal evidence construct a story. Rather than give in to these stories off the bat, Brown reiterates that those who are most resilient even articulate these words to themselves. The stories I'm telling myself are. Moreover, our brains are wired to pay attention to what others think, as we crave connection and belonging. It is crucial, however, that in order to learn from these letdowns, we seek feedback from those we trust and from those who are similarly courageous in their everyday life. At ALA, an old adage is failing forward, which implies an effort at leveraging from our mistakes. While this expression is restated, how many of us, as educators or students, actually expect imperfection or even failure from our daily lives? Being vulnerable in the context of IRC looks like your ones who had never had MUN experiences before, bringing their full selves to virtual mock sessions before they had even arrived to campus, experiencing technical challenges and anxieties, but still giving their all to these sessions. It looks like those who asked their coaches for feedback and really listened to those responses, however hard it was to hear. It looks like them fully facing where they needed to improve and putting themselves out in upcoming sessions to do so. Approaching life like this is a choice, and it may even be accompanied by our own anxious physiological reactions. But we need to remember that vulnerability gives birth to vital outcomes, including empathy for others and for ourselves, as well as joy and creativity. Whether it is through generating extraordinary ideas in these moderated and unmoderated caucuses, compassionately giving or receiving feedback, or refusing to be silent about challenging issues, I encourage you all to lean into discomfort. Overall, leaders hold themselves and others to high standards, whether privately or publicly, while embracing uncertainty. It is through this that I believe we may find that full sense of belonging that we all crave, not with others, but with ourselves. As I wrap up, I would like to thank Dean Uzo and her team for your incredible responsiveness and support for our students throughout, and my colleagues, Ms. Palumi and Mr. Omar, for your patience and constant care for our students. And again to you, the MAU 2021 team, you have achieved what seemed at some point impossible. With you all at the forefront, approaching a reality we could not have easily imagined, I feel calm with the assurance that you will lead by example and demonstrate the courage through vulnerability that I've continually witnessed. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We are gathered here to discuss the future of ALA MAU moving into 2021. What's most important to look at is the economic, social, and political happenings that have been going on in our continent as a result of COVID-19. Now, how will the future of Africa look like post-COVID-19?
I envision an Africa where human rights and essential freedoms are safeguarded during crisis, where state security apparatus remain accountable to people, notwithstanding the invocation of emergency power. I envision an Africa where the state does not muzzle the opposition under the guise and under the cover of pandemics, where the watchmen are watched by the Constitution and the African Human Rights Charter. An Africa where the rule of law is upheld and democracy is not merely a myth.
Women and youth in Africa and around the world are highly vulnerable to poverty, unemployment, and other socioeconomic difficulties. I envision an Africa where the empowerment of these two social groups lies in providing small and medium enterprises with the support to thrive even in times of crisis.
I envision an Africa where the threat of extremism is eradicated by the joint effort of African states and their people to bolster our vehicles to deal with this issue. Hence, it is important that we educate our people on the destructive propensity of extremism with the goal of building effective defense systems and communication strategies towards strengthening the resilience of African security forces in the world post-COVID-19.
I envision an Africa where load shedding and power outages are a problem of the past, where we have been able to harness our rain, our wind, and our sun in order to contribute to our energy and generation of power. It is important that we harness these natural energy resources so that we can develop our telecommunication, transport, education, and health facilities. In this, we shall have a better Africa post-COVID.
I envision an Africa in which everybody has access to financial services at low cost yet high efficiency. It is crucial that we harness the power of technological development to enhance digital financial services and to foster financial inclusion. By reducing the reliance on physical trade, we can make African economies resilient to crises like COVID-19.
I envision an Africa where each individual has the distinct ability to achieve his dream through a sustainable structured education. This fully relies on addressing the challenges posed by the fourth industrial revolution and embracing new, digitally immersive methods in our higher education.
I envision an Africa with macroeconomic stability. And key to this stability is managing the continent's debt sustainability. That is why in my committee, I'll be looking at developing alternative options to expensive and volatile external debt, which is a hindrance to the continent's development and resurgence in a post-COVID-19 world.
I envision an Africa in which the extreme death rates due to difficulty in receiving adequate medical care becomes history. Through scientific research, the continent will be enhanced to post-medical and stability post-COVID-19, as Africa cannot rise without its people's health.
I envision an Africa where public health systems are strong enough to not collapse and be ill-equipped to serve populations and communities in conflict zones. With this in mind, it is important to mitigate the impact of conflicts such as political fragmentation, armed conflicts, displacement and terrorism, among others, to safeguard public health and to prevent humanitarian disasters.
Throughout history, emergency consequences of foreign domination, the African continent. However, Africa has overcome numerous hardships, acting as a test insurmountable potential. Strength of the African continent will continue to be proven as we collectively rise and tackle the widespread effects of the ongoing pandemic. I hope that Africa post-COVID-19 will be a place of prosperity and unity. With the most important resources, Africa and ourselves, the African continent shall rise.
I hope you found inspiration in that video. I hope you found resonance with that video. I hope you found a connection to why we are here and why we are doing what we're doing.
Yes, and finding a purpose and finding a meaning about what resilience actually means for our continent post-COVID-19. I mean, Dinuzo said she hopes that after COVID-19, we do not return to business as usual, but instead we change the world. So I think that video really resonated.
Absolutely, we need a new normal.
Yes,
right?
yes,
but
yes.
I think we need to go back to Ms. Maya's speech.
Yes.
That was a rich text that deserves some unpacking. So what did she end with? Ms. Maya challenged us to think about vulnerability as courage, which I'd never really thought about.
As strength, even.
And I think it's important for men like myself who often think that being vulnerable is weak. It challenges our assumptions a little bit about what it means to lead, like to bring all of ourselves into all that we do.
And she said that vulnerability, she said we must not confuse vulnerability with not having boundaries. She said, she made a wonderful analogy about putting everything on Instagram. And I was like, I found that really funny. But I think that it's really profound, being vulnerable, being open to putting yourself out there and actually seeing, like being open to accept your weaknesses, accept your faults, and seeing that as a strength, seeing that as a weapon, as a tool, and as courage. I think that was really profound.
And I hope our delegates out there can think about how they can leverage their vulnerability as they're debating, as they're negotiating, as Dinuzo said, as we listen.
Yes.
And think about how we can grow from that. What else did she talk about? There was another leadership lesson.
She spoke about leading by example.
Right.
And I think that was profound. She mentioned how oftentimes we say a lot of things, you know, we preach, but we don't practice. And she spoke about how we should practice what we preach and said, we must lead by personal example. In your life, are you reflecting the ideals that you preach? Are you reflecting the values that you claim to uphold? And I think that really resonated with me as a young leader coming up at the African Leadership Academy. And I think that resonated with all leaders across the world, on YouTube, on Instagram, everybody joining us, that indeed, are we leading by example? Let us practice what we preach, hey?
You know, the idea of quiet, everyday leadership is so important. I mean, I think about the people who, after an event, stop and pick up the rubbish.
Yes.
The people who will, you know, this is a funny analogy, but you know when you walk into an auditorium or theater, the people who don't take the first seat in the row, but actually start by sitting in the middle to leave space for future people.
Others to actually join in, and
the
so it can
small
be
things
easier.
we do that show that we are leading by example, not just leading by big speech. I'm reminded of, did you ever meet Miss Sharmi?
No.
She was she used to work here for a long time. She's a dear friend of mine.
Yes.
And she would say, if you are too big to do the small things, then you're far too small to do the big things.
I've heard about that one. And I think what's also important is actually realizing that sometimes leadership is not about speeches and big suits and heels and all of these things, but sometimes leadership is about the little things, the things that you do every day. Hey?
And it's not about the titles either, right? It's not about honorable this or your excellency that. It's just about the quiet moments that move and touch the lives of people.
I actually believe it was Oliver Tambo who said that a leader leads from behind, not from ahead. You don't make people follow you. You stay behind with them. You lead with them. You lead as you walk with them. You don't actually show them the way. You lead as you walk with them. And I found that really profound. Leading by example. I think that's one thing that I'm taking off from this opening ceremony, leading by example. What about you, Mr. Mureke?
Well, I'm so glad that for the South Africans who are listening here, I hope you know that Oliver Tambo is more than just an airport.
Definitely.
Right? There's leadership lessons, there's wisdom in his age. But I think Dean Uzo, I'm going back to Dean Uzo's message that our voice matters. Young people's voice matters. And I hope all the delegates think about that. So, let's go to our next segment. I believe that the delegates near and far have prepared a little video, a parade of nations. So let's get ready to see the colors, the dances, the pride,
diversity,
the passion of all of our virtual community out here. So are you ready for the parade of nations?
Take it away.
Amarra capulana, uma melodia, é o som sambicana. Sente esta alegria, entra nesta dança, aqui ninguém aguenta. É o som de Moçambique, esta é marrabenta. Anima marrabenta, anima marrabenta, anima marrabenta, anima marrabenta. Marrabenta anima neima, anima anima marrabenta, marrabenta anima neima, anima anima marrabenta. É só chunguesquis, 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 é só chunguesquis, 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 é só chunguesquis, chunguesquis, chunguesquis.
I'm in love with plenty women. I know my money, all of them. You know my body shape or color. I go make sure say I must collect. I get one with be my sponsor. I get one with they call me honey. One with she they do like the chance of Zoko. Wale, Tyler, getting my room into the dawn. Body they move like a python. Oh, what they giving me iron. Wale, I do like woman. Me, I know they burn. Me, I know they burn. I do like woman. I do like woman. Me, I know they burn. Me, I know they burn. Apolo echo, oh echo, apolo echo, oh echo. Ikebe one major, ja one, ja two, ja three. Apolo echo, oh echo, apolo echo, oh echo. Ikebe one major, ja one, ja two, ja three. Too many girls in my DM. Uganda to London to Benin. I pray make I no go reply them. Never to be an love, back to the
Loving the parade of nations, loving the creativity, loving the passion, loving the energy.
There was a lot of diversity as well.
We're seeing all of our colors.
Yes.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote for the day, Ambassador Jessica Le Pen. She is a dedicated diplomat, a career member of the Foreign Service, and the US Ambassador to the African Union, as well as the US Permanent Representative to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Just prior to this assignment, she was the charge d'affaires in South Africa. She's had previous leadership roles as the Chief of Staff to the Undersecretary of State for Civilian Security and Deputy Chief of Mission in Kigali, Rwanda. She joined the American Foreign Service back in 1994, and she served in Jeddah, and Riyadh, and Paris, and Tbilisi, and Baghdad, and Jerusalem, all around the world. She's also had a portfolio that covered Libya, in Tunisia, thinking about human rights. She's been an advisor in the Security Council at the US mission to New York. She really is the person to help us think about the conference and the themes of the day. Ambassador Le Pen hails from New York City in the United States. She's a graduate of Harvard and Cambridge, and she has been taking her 11-year-old son on most of her recent journeys. Ambassador Le Pen, it's an honor to welcome you to give us a few remarks.
Thanks so much. Thanks for that great introduction. Whenever I hear an introduction like that, I think, God, that person that you're talking about must be about 100 years old. But thank you for that. I appreciate it. And really, let me start by thanking all of you who put together this year's ALA Model AU conference. I specifically want to congratulate Malika and Sophia, who worked directly with my team. Also thank Dean Uzo and Ms. Maya and Zabi, as well as ALA's Global Programs Office and the MAU Secretariat, and really the whole ALA MAU 2021 team. And also just to acknowledge the ALA crowd that I know, Dean Hattem and Chris Bradford, whom I've worked with previously. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you this year. I'm sort of blown away by the energy of just the pieces of this first session that I saw. And it's striking for me to see an energy and a positivity and a looking forward, because I feel like we've been in a year in which we've been mired almost in a present and in a sense of loss. It's 1 year since the COVID pandemic began, and in many ways, it's just been a terrible year. Many of us have lost friends and family, and for South Africa and for the US, we've been hit especially hard. So I really want to begin today and this, what I hope will be a conversation with a message of condolence and of solidarity. because we've all been impacted by this pandemic, not in the same ways, and we know not equally, but all of us have been impacted, and we hope that we begin to see some light at the end of a very, very long tunnel. I think I want, in terms of COVID, to start a discussion around the AU in the COVID context, because what we've seen in the last year from the AU in terms of its COVID response has been really particularly impressive. And I think it illustrates what can the AU do. Sort of when we talk about it, a lot of times it's very conceptual. And what we've seen this year in terms of COVID response has been very concrete, very on the ground. So what do I mean? When I talk about COVID response, I'm mostly talking about the role that Africa CDC, which is the AU's Centers for Disease and Prevention, Disease Control and Prevention for Africa, they've been at the center of the work, but very much in concert with member states. And so this, I think, is, as you go through the next few days and you think about the AU, right, and you play the role of member states, and I love, as I look on the Zoom participants, seeing delegate of, as you play the role of member states, keep somewhere in mind this dynamic of member states and commission. And so the role of Africa CDC in response to COVID-19 has really been a great example of that dynamic. So early February 2020, they very quickly responded when there were only a few cases of COVID on the continent. So they established a continent-wide COVID-19 task force, and it brought together many of the continent's health ministers, and the goal was a common approach. Right, because you'll recall that at the beginning, so much focus was on travel. And I remember the measures that ALA took at the time and the challenges of students from across the continent being locked down and locked in. And so those were the kinds of issues that Africa CDC was thinking about continent-wide, how to monitor, how to restrict the movements of those at risk. And they also developed a comprehensive comms strategy, right? Because we know in public health, it's really important. And they focused on the science, the latest sort of public health knowledge as it was changing. And they helped a lot of countries with COVID-19 testing programs. I am not a scientist, so I'm always like reluctant to be too confident in the space of talking about a pandemic. But I really believe that when the history is written, Africa CDC's responsive, attentive, focused engagement will have been a factor in explaining why the pandemic's impact in Africa to date was less severe than what was expected and then in other parts of the world. And I think that's really relevant for the theme of this year, which is an Africa United, right? Fostering resilience post-pandemic. And so for me, as the US ambassador to the African Union, I'm really proud of our relationship with Africa CDC, which I'm talking about in detail, but it's of course an example, it's a microcosm, it's a lens for our broader relationship with the AU. But for us with Africa CDC, there's a huge commitment, particularly in terms of technical experience and expertise, but also going back really to its founding in response to Ebola in 2017. So I've mentioned sort of, the experience at ALA, about 15, roughly a year ago. And I guess I should say that I have the privilege of being an FO ALA, if that's a thing. Probably a friend of ALA is not a thing, but I certainly have been, and know, count among friends, many alumni. That relationship comes from the time that I was charge at the US Embassy in South Africa. And now, because you guys are going through like diplomatic training, charge is the acting ambassador. So I was the acting ambassador in South Africa for 3 years. And I love the reference to before you guys were talking about, not about titles, not your excellency, this and that. And I will say charge definitely sounds like a pretty pretentious title, but that is all it was, that I was the acting ambassador for 3 years, and had the privilege of being on campus, right? Because in those days you could be on campus. And I have always been really impressed with ALA as an institution, with amazing students, all of you, as well as staff, and a dedication to Pan-Africanism and making it a reality, and also to developing the continent's next generation of leaders. And I think probably people get tired of hearing that they are the next generation of leaders, but don't get tired of it. Hear it, take it in, and embrace it, and then do the work that those expectations inspire. I'm really happy today to have been asked to join you in kicking off the Model AU conference, and specifically to be talking about the role of young people, the role of youth. It's all of you, but it's also the constituency, the population, the people that we know are crucial for Africa's success. And so when we talk about this concept of youth as the present and the future of Pan-Africanism, I think rooting that in the ALA experience is really valuable, because the founders of ALA were focused on that concept and that vision, and on implementing a plan of action to keep Pan-Africanism front and center in ALA's education. And I'm going to read from the founding documents, which probably none of you take a look at, but it says a Pan-African approach is needed to catalyze growth and development in Africa. That African leaders must understand and collaborate with peers across the continent to remove barriers to trade and conflict and stimulate widespread positive change. Now, I promise you, if I told people here in Addis, if I read that, they would just assume that it was something coming from the AU, right? It's sounds very much like an AU document. So it makes a lot of sense to me that ALA students should lead the way to help young Africans across the continent to think about, to understand the issues that are core to the AU, that are what the AU is about, the problems they're trying to solve, the challenges that get in the way of those solutions. And for us as the US, we are thrilled to be part of this effort and this journey, and spend a lot of time engaging with the AU, supporting the AU, and contributing to Pan-Africanism in that way. And that's really what we do at USAU. USAU is the nickname for US mission to the African Union. Obviously, this conversation, in terms of hearing from a US government person, this conversation takes place in a really interesting moment in terms of the US engagement with the continent. If you've been watching the last sort of almost 2 months from the US, you'll have seen huge outreach from the new administration to the AU and across the continent. President Biden spoke on the occasion of the 34th AU summit, and it was in many ways one of the first big foreign policy steps that he did. Obviously in COVID times is virtual, but his main message was a recommitment to strengthening the US-Africa relationship. And since then, we've really seen a flurry of phone calls from across the administration to across the continent. So the US, in fact, was the first non-African dedicated mission accredited to the AU. So since 2006, we have been here with an ambassador and an independent mission that's focused on partnering with the Commission and with member states who are here. And the effort is really to pursue shared values, advancing global health, ensuring peace and security, promoting democracy, human rights, governance. Increasingly, there's a focus on climate change, and also a huge amount of work on trade and investment, largely through the vehicle of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The core work for us at USAU is leading all the US agencies that want to contribute to that mission, that want to support the AU Commission to develop, to implement policies across all these priorities. So for us, we do that in lots of ways. Some is technical assistance, some is sharing global best practices, particularly around regulatory and policy issues, and then also fostering dialogue to figure out where our interests common, where our values shared, and to work on that. And one of the areas that we work on is specifically in the area of young people, of Africa's youth, and specifically around building cross-continental ties. So we do this with the AU through the Youth Volunteer Corps, but we also have our own programs that I want to tell you just a little bit about. Some of you may know it, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of you ultimately participated in it. It's called the Young African Leadership Initiative, known as YALI. It was started by then President Obama maybe 10 years ago. And through YALI and its flagship program, the Mandela Washington Fellowship, amazing young Africans from across the continent spend a month and a half in the US at a US university, including some of what we call our historically Black colleges and universities. And these YALI experiences are really about a couple things. One is about leadership skills, a lot of the kinds of skills that you all are talking about. The other is about connecting with Americans, particularly the African diaspora in the United States. And then the other is about connecting with one another as Africans. And my own experience in talking to YALIs as they return is that that's what's sort of most amazing. Each of them, wherever they come from, they say, oh my gosh, do you know how other Africans see us? Do you know what I learned from other Africans? And for me, that experience that many alumni have shared with me always stands out. Look, in terms of the role of African youth, you know the statistics, right? The continent's median age, right? There's roughly 1.3 billion people. The median age is 19. So it's about a year older than most of you. In sub-Saharan Africa, more than 60% of the population is under 25. And so we know that that means that for the continent to tackle the issues that it faces, from economic opportunity to challenges to peace and security, to real obstacles to meaningful democracy and good governance, young people, that's all of you need to contribute, need to work together for your communities, for your countries, for your continent. And we see the impact of that work. We see all the time the results of the work of young people. So if I think about how the YALI program, for example, has impacted, we see amazing work that's being done in communities when people come home and then they say, hang on, I have this amazing network, and they bring that network to leverage change. And we love, to be honest, telling the stories of the work that they do, because by telling stories, we give voice, we give power to their experience, to their impact. And I'll give an example. So right this month is Women's History Month. And so we're doing a lot to highlight, to tell the story of young African women and what they are doing in agriculture, in trade, in health, leveraging their continental YALI network. Anyway, you can tell I love talking about YALI and US government program alumni because I feel like the impact is so significant and so concrete. But I know that in a way it's preaching to the converted with this audience. One of ALA's founders, Fred Swaniker, was an alumni of YALI. I think he was in the first cohort. And so he clearly understood that. The founders of ALA clearly understood that as well. The power of bringing together the continent's future leaders together in a Pan-African spirit. And obviously all of you also already really understand that. So I'm very excited to be here with you, to have watched the videos and to share a little bit of the energy that you're bringing and to help kick off this year's conference. Look, over the next couple of days, you'll really replicate what happens in the African Union and in its annual summit. That's opening remarks, committee debates, action plans, draft resolutions. This will give you an opportunity to learn about an international body, an international fora, and the mechanics of it. How does it work? How do things happen? How do they not happen? And I think you'll get some sense of the complexities of the work, And I'm thrilled for you. And I hope that you are able to soak up the experience, to take a lot from it, and that I'll see the results of that in future years. My advice as you go forward in this experience is to jump in on discussions on regional conflicts. Think about political will. What's the challenge to political will? People talk a lot about early warning. Think about early action. How can Africa be more resilient in the wake of COVID-19? And don't be limited by the concept of African solutions for African problems. Think of African solutions for the world's problems. This is an amazing opportunity for all of you to experiment and create solutions for a world that really needs your inputs. So most importantly, though, you'll work together, right? As representatives from across the continent looking at hard problems. And I salute you for that. I also really want to acknowledge your curiosity, your commitment about the world and for the world, and your dedication to bringing impact. We look forward to seeing what you do and how you do it, and hopefully seeing all of you one day either in the AU or representing your own countries in the diplomatic corps. Congratulations on the work that you're embarking on and all that you will do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Le Pen, for giving us that that overview of the kind of the breadth and the depth of your work at USAU. And I really appreciated what you said at the end about encouraging these young people, these delegates, to generate African solutions to African problems, but African solutions to global problems. Yes. And I do want to thank you for offering your time to have a Q&A. So I'm going to invite my colleague here, who many of you will meet as a deputy chairperson, but many of you don't know that she's also a budding podcast host. So she will facilitate she'll facilitate the Q&A with you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Morake. Thank you so much, Ambassador Le Pen. I think that our delegates appreciated your remarks as much as we did. And also we appreciate the fact that you wanted to engage with our delegates, you wanted to engage with us in a Q&A session. So thank you very much for that. And I think the key highlights that I got from your remarks were around Pan-Africanism, were around youth and the power of youth. And they were also around leadership. And I think that those will be key when we go into this Q&A. But right before we get into that, I wanted to just ask, how are you doing today?
Terrific, thank you. This is definitely the highlight of my day, though, I have to tell you.
That's great. That's great. I think our first question is around your suggestions about how we can foster an Africa united and how we can foster resilience during these tricky times of COVID-19 and possibly after COVID-19 as well. And I think that also connects to our theme for ALAMAU 2021.
Is that the question? So I'm so sorry, the connection is not that great. Is that the question?
Yes, the question was around your suggestions about how we can foster resilience and foster an Africa united during these tough times of COVID-19.
Okay, terrific. And there's a terrible delay. So look, maybe I'll start there. Right, one of the challenges we've seen around COVID has been communication, and so the experience is really different depending where you are and what your Wi-Fi looks like. And so I don't think mine is as good as yours. And I think that's we've all throughout this pandemic really relied on virtual engagement. And I think there's been a way in which it's almost at a personal level, right? We can think of resilience in a lot of ways. One is at the personal level, and the other is at the broader, at the national level. And it seems to me there's value of thinking on it in two ways, right? When we think about national resilience, we're thinking about big issues of infrastructure. How do you make sure that people have power and water and Wi-Fi? So the same then is true in terms of flexibility, of sustainability, of personal resilience. What do you need? And for most of us, a lot of it is about connection. It's about human connection. And I think there's a way in which the pandemic has brought a lot of us inward, right? Much less time out and about, much more time inside with one's self. And that can be positive, it can be negative. But there's a lot of value in thinking through the tests to resilience that each of us have experienced, and our communities and our countries, and saying, how do we do? What did we do well? What do we want to work on? And in some ways, what are some of the systems or practices we adopted to manage COVID that we want to keep? What do we like doing online? What do we want to return to doing in person? And there's a lot of discussions about the future of education, the future of work. What accommodations have we made because of COVID that actually give us ideas about learning and working going forward? So I think what's interesting about this challenge for a young audience is the older people don't have a monopoly of wisdom on this, because I might have all this professional experience, but I've got no more experience on living and working through COVID than any of you. And so there's a lot of space, I think, then for young people to contribute. I won't make some bad joke about young people's sort of tech ability and how that made them better able to manage some of the COVID-related challenges. But, of course, there's some truth to that. And so I think there's a lot of contributions and space for young people to think through not just their experience, like what happened to me, but what happened to me and to others, and how does that then help me? What can I contribute? Thank you.
That's great. I think what I'm getting from that is that young people have the power to affect change, and young people they're actually the pioneers of the new world, because COVID-19 has shifted things and it has changed the world. And young people actually are in the position to recreate the new world and recreate how we want to see our world post COVID-19. And perhaps if we're looking for that resilience lies in young people. And I think just on that note, I wanted to ask, what role, particularly in African unity, do you think young people can play?
So it's a great question. I think I offer two thoughts. One is unity requires connection, empathy, thinking about others, right? It's not only how do I connect to you, but wait, what's your experience? What are you going to take from this? How am I part of something larger, right? It is the concept of Ubuntu. And I think it's hugely important. But it's important that it be seen and experienced that way, which is for the greater good. But the second half for me that's, I think, implicit in your question is, what's the space for impact, right? Because unity is one, about experience and connectivity, and two, it's about impact, about changing one's community or country or continent or globe. And so I think there's so much space for young people in that. And it's funny because normally I would say, think local first, right? They say, write what you know. And I think there's a lot of value in thinking about change first in a community that you know, which doesn't mean don't be ambitious. Be ambitious, think about change and impact on a broader scale, but there's some value in thinking about changing things where you are first. But there's a lot of ways of doing it that is connected, right? So if you're making change at a local level, there's no reason not to be connected to other local change makers, right? You're sharing with them, you're learning from them, but you're solving local problems because those are the ones realistically that growing up in a community, you know best. Because you've seen how it's impacting in your neighborhood, and you probably have some of the best ideas around solutions. So there's a way of thinking, who am I in this community? How can I bring change and improvement locally while recognizing all of it takes place in a larger context, and connectivity and unity can bring value to the work that I'm doing, but also to the work of others.
Definitely. And I think what you just said sort of ties together what Mr. Murek and I were talking about the power of youth, what Din Uzo spoke about, what Ms. Maya spoke about. And I think what you just said really reinforced those sentiments. And I think the question that we've also been wanting to ask is around what challenges has your department and your office actually been facing during this pandemic?
So I think in a lot of ways, all of us had some of the same problems, right? Just the rapid disruption to daily life. So at the individual level, that experience, I think, is largely common, right? For many people, depending on the nature of their work, they still have to get out and go to work. We had privilege of office work. And so we were able to think about how that changed. I think like many, there was a new experience around fear, right? Lots of people live with daily fear. Many of us are privileged not to, and all of a sudden we did. I think those were significant, but sort of in many ways, not necessarily unique to us. I've already referenced internet challenges. I think that's been a huge challenge, right? My team is a mix of local staff who are Ethiopian staff who are working for us here, and then of American staff who come from afar, right? So just feeling separated from family and friends is a significant challenge. And then I think probably many of you had something similar, which is, how do you feel connected with your coworkers or classmates when you're not with them all the time? And we saw that especially with new staff. So not dissimilar from people who, and many ALA students, for example, who went to the States for university, really struggled to find their way because all of a sudden they were really only online. So I think that experience is really challenging and alienating. And then the other that's a mix of positive and negative was the change in the global agenda, right? So all of a sudden, the world went from not worrying about COVID, but worrying about a whole series of other things, to COVID becoming the number 1, 2, and 3 priorities. And so for us, there was a lot of interesting work, especially in the beginning, about how do we absorb this new focus? How do we take it on board? And what does it mean, not only for how we work, but what our work is? And so we were able, I think, in a way that felt very affirming and inspiring, to reorganize some of our work to increase our focus on COVID and global health.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted, just before we move on, to apologize for the delay. I think one thing that COVID has taught us is to really thrive in the world of technical difficulties.
Well said.
And I think we really appreciate those remarks that you just made, but I just wanted to raise one last question. And I think that we spoke about leadership, we spoke about the power of youth, and we spoke about Pan-Africanism. In this conference, we have about 250 young people who are ready to engage, who are ready to think about the problems of this continent. And I wanted to know, what advice do you want to give our delegates, our observers, our advisors, as they go into the conference, our committee chairs, our deputy chairs, our moderators, everybody in the research component of MAU, who will be going into deliberating about these intricate and complex issues that are crucial for African development?
So I can take the question sort of big picture or practical. So I'm going to go kind of practical, right? Which is, you walk into a meeting totally prepared. You know your issues, you know what you're going to say, you're ready. But then when you get there, you've done the prep. So don't focus on all that you've prepared and all that you want to say. Then you got to, having done all that work, now you've got to shift gears when you're in the room. And actually what you need to do is listen, because that's where you're going to be able to find space, to find opportunity, to find compromise, to find the room for impact. Because otherwise you're just going, you're just talking. But it's in the talking and the listening that I think you'll be able to find the opportunity for impact, which at the end, right, is what these organs of the AU and these mechanisms are about. So as you poke and prod these processes, think of it as a test, as an experiment of how can they work better. And so I would offer advice on listening as much as talking.
And I know that our delegates, our advisors, everybody on this call appreciated the insight that you brought into this conversation. And we just wanted to thank you. Thank you for your support for the African Leadership Academy. Thank you for your support of ALAMAU. And yeah, and I think we just want to wish you best of luck with whatever that lies ahead, and wish your office the best of luck with everything that lies ahead. And with that, I think Mr. Morake will be introducing the Parade of Nations.
Parade of Nations. Thank you once again, Ambassador. We now go to part 2 of our Parade of Nations. Again, the celebration of the diversity across the breadth and length of the African continent, all the schools, all the delegations represented. Let's listen to some music. Let's see some dancing. Parade away.
Hold your body and shake it well.
Bàbá òjò ṣẹ́gun bó.
Ayé ti tù láńgbá iná. Naish tó bẹ̀rẹ̀ la. Dọ́tà Májínátì Àkàlẹ́. Amachuchu banga, banga mangongori yago, eka koko nikashma. Shon teletela kurio, choto. Amachuchu banga, banga mangongori yago, eka koko nikashma.
Get the best of me. Well, destiny. Can't touch my destiny. They can take everything I have. They can take my life. They can't touch my destiny. Sparking up, and I'm living enemies, I'm charging up. Cause we never smile when I'm trying off with us. As a was hard enough, cutting all the guys that was starting us. So also to the start, it's marvelous. Roll deep like I'm driving a party bus. We was just a bunch of fucking foreigners, so one to trust, I know that they don't want me. Came along with me, standing on the corridors, jumping beds in the corridors. Hey! Destiny. Yeah, it's my destiny. Gonna try everything, gonna try to my life, but I won't let them get the best of me. Destiny. Yeah, that's my destiny. They can take everything I have, they can take my life, they can't touch my destiny. 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 I'ma try everything, I'ma try to take my life, but I won't let them get the best of me. Destiny. Can't touch my destiny. They can take everything I have, they can take my life, they can't touch my destiny.
And we live diversity, unity, friendship, and
Wow, I don't know about you, Sia, but I am ready to meet all of those delegates. If they're going to bring this much color to the conference, this much passion to the proceedings, this much spice to the sessions, I am ready. Thank you all the paraders, thank you all the delegates, thank you all the schools that are.
And I think just after meeting the delegates in the schools, I think I am ready to meet the 2021 team.
Oh, yeah.
The people who have been working behind the scenes to create this vibrant virtual conference. I think that this team has worked incredibly well. We've
tirelessly.
Tirelessly. We've heard Uzo speak about them. We've heard Miss Maya speak about how they were figuring out how MAU was going to happen virtual. And this is the first virtual MAU. So I think let's meet the team. Let's meet the team, guys. Take it away.
Your grace, whenever we did, my love no get shame, no matter the case, my music give me bass, a sweet, sweet bass, so my love no get shame, for you are there, every night, every day, me go need my baby to call on me, close to me. By the time, when you wake up in the morning, when I dey buy you side for me, make you fall for me. Oh yeah, joro, 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 ja, joro, 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 ja, joro, whoa, whoa.
to make you banana. Oh, joro, 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 jara, joro. Never leave me when I need you by my side. Oh, I just suck when you can, oh, then you can, oh, I just suck. Me, I go love you all day, love you all night, all the time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. It was really lovely meeting the lovely team of ALA MAU 2021. It's really good to see people who are putting in the effort. And these are my colleagues, these are my classmates, these are my friends. And it's really good to see the conference come together. I'd just like to thank each and every single one of you. Thank you to everybody in the secretariat, everybody in the logistics team, everybody in the research team, all the teachers, staff, and faculty who've been helping us. Dean Uzo, who's been a mother to us all. And I think this conference is going to be a success. I think it's going to be a success. And thank you to the team that has been working for about 12 months now. And I think it was just lovely to have our delegates and our advisors to meet them. And I think as the conference goes ahead, we are looking forward to having a success.
And I want to extend my thanks to all the delegates and the advisors out there, all of the work that you have done, preparing position papers, researching, mock sessions, whatever your preparation, your deliberate practice has been. Yes. On the journey to this day. You are appreciated, you are welcome, we see you. Now, actually, I want to thank you. Let me thank my co-host, my co-host. It's been so much fun doing this live stream with you. You are a star.
Thank you so much. You are a star as well. I think we make a team. We make a good team.
It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the ALA MAU 2021 conference chairperson, a student of mine, Safia Aladuni, who is going to close this moment and open the session.
Esteemed delegates, advisors, organizing team, and distinguished guest, Ambassador Le Pen. Manufactured in a multicultural household, I am a product of diversity. My mother is Swedish American and my father is Moroccan, with both Amazigh and Arab roots. I recognize that a large part of my identity is based on this cultural hybrid background. The realization and acceptance of my complex heritage marked the beginning of my journey toward defining which beliefs and values I could support and practice. As a kid, I found myself in an environment where being American was different, and where difference, to a large extent, was synonymous with uniqueness. However, as I engaged with the Moroccan people and spaces around me, I recognized that my individual struggles were more closely aligned to those of young Moroccan women. My identity as a woman, I found, was more important than my nationality, even as they both made up parts of my identity. There were several societal rules, both spoken and unspoken, that govern the ways in which I was expected to act. I carried myself based on different expectations, both from ways I could dress, and often the correct way to dress was something that was along the lines of nothing too short or curve revealing, to ways in which I was catering to catered to men unnamed and unknown to me, to the expectations regarding the fervor and volume with which I could address inequities and injustices around me. As I developed my Moroccan identity, I began to understand the importance of equity, diversity, and inclusion as agents of change in our increasingly polarized world. But developing my Moroccan identity was not enough. I found that beyond being different, it was far more important to engage with and embrace difference. While this has never been more necessary, conversations and interactions with those different from us remain lacking. Society at whole continues, for the most part, to be blissfully ignorant and unwilling to seek discomfort in efforts to grow as accepting individuals. My attempts to solve this issue and seek discomfort involved, as a first step, applying to and enrolling at ALA. Beyond solidifying my Moroccan identity, my experiences at ALA, ranging from the classes I have taken to the interactions I have had with people from all over the continent, have importantly allowed me to develop a Pan-African identity. Developing a strong identity, especially one that is Pan-African and extends beyond that which we know and are comfortable with as individuals, I would argue is a crucial stepping stone as we move towards African unity. I would like to begin by exploring the theory of intersectionality and the idea of embracing discomfort, which I believe are two principles that will help us achieve unity. Omang is a Setswana word that translates to "who are you?" At ALA, Omang is a course students take during their first term of their first year that is related to identity. Who are you? Who am I? And who are we? Students who have taken this class may remember dissecting the intersecting axes of privilege, domination, and oppression, which speak to the intersectionality of the content of the continent. This intersectionality here refers to the ways in which social identities overlap. Further, it is a way of considering all of our identities and recognizing how one or more of them may factor into the ways we experience oppression. Categories of these social identities include components like sex, gender, race, ability, sexuality, age, class, educational level, and religion, among several others. Such conditions work together to determine whether an individual will be privileged within their specific environment. For example, an individual may be a male, privileged, a member of the LGBTQ+ community, unprivileged, educated, privileged, able-bodied, privileged, and a person of color, unprivileged. Because our identities are multifaceted, it is important that we learn to consider how we can best use our positions in society to enact positive and impactful change. If we each consider who we are and how we fit into the world around us, we can determine where our impacts will be most felt. Next, I would like to explore the idea of seeking discomfort. In 2017, Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie said in a speech, "To stand for social justice is, in many cases, to be uncomfortable. Please be willing to be uncomfortable. You might squirm a bit, you should squirm a bit, because nobody really enjoys being uncomfortable. But be uncomfortable. Discomfort can breed resilience. Discomfort can open up new understanding and meaning and knowledge. Standing for social justice is not without consequences, and there are worse consequences than being uncomfortable. Oftentimes, because we are not taught to embrace our African identities and are instead exposed to dismal narratives of the African continent, we tend to forget that we are responsible for challenging such narratives and devising solutions to various pertinent challenges. As African and global citizens, we should not detach ourselves from issues that affect us and those around us for the mere freedom of living in blissful ignorance. This blissful ignorance works to fuel systems of oppression. May we take control over the representation of and pride in our African identities, for this may allow us to more clearly understand our joint trajectory towards African unity. Why then is African unity important? When the Organization of African Unity, what became the African Union, was established in 1963, Its objectives included ridding the continent of remaining colonial vestiges, promoting unity and solidarity amongst African states, and coordinating and intensifying cooperation for development. The same principles guide the AU today, and so guide us. However, ALA-MAU recognizes that these principles remain broad and largely indigestible. As the next generation of leaders and changemakers, the responsibility lies on us to ensure that we create comprehensive and implementable plans. Because of this, even in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, our team remained more than just committed to the mandate of bringing together youth from across the continent and globe to engage with and work towards tackling the continent's most pertinent challenges. After all, progress leaves no time for pause. As ALA Online, the continued dedication, engagement, and support demonstrated by this year's conference participants showcase the tremendous promise, potential, and drive of our youth. Beyond attending conferences such as ALA-MAU, however, I also believe it is important for us to reform systems that do not allow us to develop our identities as Africans. Let us use education to deconstruct the perspectives shaped around colonial ways of thinking. May our intellectual exploration center around the works of the likes of Tai Selassie, Binyavanga Wainaina, Tsitsi Dangaremba, and Nawal Sidawi. Let us acknowledge that experiences often shape mindsets, and let us measure the value of incorporating other perspectives into education worldwide. The conference theme of ALA-MAU 2021 is An Africa United, Fostering Resilience Post-COVID-19. It is my hope that this theme will encourage delegates and advisors alike to think deeply about the realization of a sustainable and robust recovery following the pandemic. How can we rethink traditional methods of teaching and learning in such a way that incorporates digital innovation? What policies need to be reevaluated to protect the economic statuses of women and youth? How can we advance our scientific research to improve the continent's medical readiness? What must we do to hold states that violate human rights and threaten the dignity of African people accountable? Importantly, how may our unity enable us to secure prosperity even in the face of adversity? Delegates, may your experience over the next 4 days be fulfilling, eye-opening, and empowering. Uniquely, ALA-MAU is a conference created by youth for youth. We believe in unlocking the potential of youth as, despite existing as the continent with the youngest population, our leadership is oftentimes not representative of us. Leverage this and harness your potential as thinkers and leaders. Look beyond outdated narratives of the African continent. Work to develop deliberate Pan-African solutions. Put plans for the Africa you wish to see into action. As you serve as representatives of nations that are not your own, examine the similarities and differences that exist between yours and theirs, and consider how the solutions you devise can be implemented around the continent. With that, it is my great honor and privilege to announce ALA-MAU 2021 is now in session.